In today's lesson, we're going to look even more at similar triangles. So after this lesson, you should be able to understand the concept of similar triangles. Hopefully you already have a pretty good understanding of similar triangles. We're just going to dive a little bit more into them. We're going to be able to identify similar triangles, and we'll also use indirect measurement to find missing measures in similar triangles. We already know that similar triangles have congruent corresponding angles, and they also have proportional corresponding sides. Right now we are going to, in the problems that we're going to deal with, we're going to assume that the sides are proportional, and we are just going to look at the angle measures. If we have two congruent angles in a triangle, then that third angle must also be congruent. And if you think about that, we know that all triangles add up to be 180 degrees. So if two of those angles are the same, then obviously that third one must also be equal to the third angle as well. That's the only way that we can add up to be 180 degrees is with that third same amount. So let's look at a couple examples here, tell whether the triangles are similar, and explain. Looking at example A, we can clearly see there's a 43-degree angle here in the first triangle, and there's a 43-degree angle in the second triangle. We have a 58 here and a 59 on this side. So this y right here would have to be 58 degrees in order to be congruent to each other or similar to each other. And we would also need this x to be 59 degrees in order for them to be similar to each other. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of the triangles, and we know that the triangles, interior angles of a triangle must add up to be 180 degrees. So we're just going to solve for that missing angle. So I'm going to combine like terms, 101 degrees plus x, subtract 101, and I get x should be 79 degrees, which is not the 59 that I know that it needs to be in order to be congruent. So again, I have the 43 angles are congruent, but then I don't have a second angle. See, I have a 79 and a 59, or I have a 58 and a 59. Neither of those are congruent to that 59 angle, so there's no way that this triangle, these two triangles can be similar. So I would say no, they are not similar. Because they only have one congruent angle. I don't even have to find that y value there, though I could in order to solidify my understanding of it, but there's no way, like I said, I would have to have had a 59 either here or here in order to have my triangles being similar. Let's do letter B together as well. As we are looking at these two triangles here, I notice that I have an angle of 52 degrees here and an angle of 52 degrees here, so I do have one congruent corresponding angle. Now I would have to check to see, is 48 going to be that y value, and or is y going to be that x value? So I just pick one of my triangles. I'm going to pick the one on the left-hand side again. I'm going to add up all of my angles. And I know that it has to add up to be 180 degrees. So when I add my angles together, my like terms, and subtract, I get x equals 80 degrees. There is so again, I started out with 52 degrees is one of my congruent angles, and then 80 is my other congruent angle. That means the only way that I can go 52 plus 80 and then subtract it from 180, I would automatically have this third angle congruent as well. That's the only way that I can add up to be 180 degrees. So yes, these are similar. Because they have two congruent angles. Therefore, third angle is also congruent. Okay, why don't you pause the video and see if letter C are similar triangles. All right, in letter C, I notice I have a 90-degree in each of those triangles, so there's one of my congruent angles. Now I want to see, is y going to be 43 or is x going to be 47? Again, I'm going to use the left-hand side, but again, it doesn't really matter, so I'm going to go 90 plus 43 plus x equals 180. Combine my like terms. Subtract. And I get x equals 47 degrees. So if x is 47 degrees, there is my second pair of congruent angles. That means that y must be 43 degrees as well. So yes, these are similar as well. Because they have two congruent angles. All right, the last thing that we're going to learn about in this lesson is indirect measurement. Indirect measurement uses similar figures to find a missing measure when it is difficult to find directly. This is used a lot in real life. It is very difficult to measure everything, but we need to know the measures of a lot of things, such as really tall buildings, or the distances across a lake or a river, or something really, really small that is also very difficult to measure. So indirect measurement, again, is used very often in the real world and something that is encountered often. Let's look at this example that we have. You plan to cross a river and want to know how far it is on the other side. You take measurements on your side of the river and make the drawing shown. Explain why triangle ABC and triangle DEC are similar. So first we need to look at this triangle, and I should notice that angle E and angle B are congruent to each other. So I should list that. Angle B is congruent to angle E. They are both right angles, so they are congruent to each other. Look for a minute, see if you notice another pair of congruent angles that you can easily identify with maybe some terminology that we have used earlier on in Chapter 3. Hopefully, you might see, oh, that kind of looks like a parallel line there, and that looks like a parallel line, and here's a transversal. So I could, and actually I'll trace right over that. There's a parallel line, there's a parallel line, there's a transversal. So if I was looking at angle A to angle D, those would be congruent to each other because they are alternate interior angles. That's one possibility, one thing that you could see. So I could see angle A is congruent to angle D because they are alternate interior angles. All I really need is two of them to prove that they are similar to each other. So therefore, and a little shorthand way to write or a symbol for therefore is three little dots in a triangle. Triangle ABC is similar. Remember, similar is just one little curly Q. Triangle DEC. Even though I only need those two angles, I'm going to show you how the other one is also congruent as well. Okay, I can also see right here this angle C, even though it's in 4 different spots. I'll tell you how that we can identify that a little bit easier. Those are directly across from each other. Hopefully we know that those are vertical angles. So that is another thing that we know. So instead of the alternate interior angles, maybe we would have noticed that angle C, and I'm going to show you how we identify this. So I want you to also write this down, even though we only need to write down 2 of them in the for any problems that you do in the future. I need you to understand how to write down an angle, even if it, when it uses that same when it has that same vertex point. So when I'm going to write that angle, I'm going to go A, C, so C is the vertex, B. See how that makes that angle right there? I say all 3 letters, and the C, where the angle is, that is the angle that I'm talking about. So angle A, C, B is congruent to angle, and I got to go in the right order. So since I started up at A here, I'd start down at D here. D, C, there's my vertex, E. And that's because they are vertical. And we know vertical angles are congruent to each other. Okay, again, you really only need 2 of those, but it's very important that we understand how to label an angle when it's too confusing to just use 1 letter, because that will pop up in the future. Okay, so what is the distance across, distance x across the river? We need to use proportions to find out. So we're going to use those proportions that we know, and we're going to write a ratio here. So we got to use those proportional sides, corresponding sides. So if I said x, you should be able to know that the corresponding side to that would be 50, then equals, again staying in the smaller one, 30, and it corresponds to 40. And I'm going to cross multiply, and then divide. And I get x equals 37.5 feet. Don't forget about your summary and your question. Make sure that you are writing 2 to 3 sentences on your summary and showing all that you know on your question part. I would like you to make a star right now in your summary portion so that I know that you are listening to the video.